most of you know, the West Bank has a traditional, it's been traditionally an immigrant community. It's been a home to the eclectic, the political, for as long as its history, as long as it's been the West Bank. My name is Jamie Schumacher. I'm the director of the West Bank Business Association. It's really no surprise that I fell in love with the West Bank community. Both of my parents are immigrants. My father immigrated from Sri Lanka, my mother immigrated from Poland, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really drawn to work in this neighborhood and help these businesses. Also, my job is like really eclectic, and I've got a really mixed backgrounds of arts and working with small businesses. I have a background in the restaurant industry as well. And this job allows me to do like all of those things. Like I get to work with performing artists, I get to work with musicians, I get to work with small businesses, I get to work with restaurants, I get to work with craft beer, I get to work with theater, and I get to work with nonprofits, which when you're talking about small business development, nonprofits have their own really unique set of needs. I think it's a perfect match for what I like to do, and it always keeps things interesting. This is something that we've kind of been ruminating for a really long time, doing like an introduction in the neighborhood. So Damon from the Southern approached me and he's like, well, if you had a week at the Southern to do whatever you wanted to do with, what would you do? And I'm like, well, that's something Damon and I have been talking about for a while. It's like, what can we do that highlights all the different like eclectic musicians and artists that have performed on the West Bank, but isn't really duplicating what people are doing in the venues. So that's when we came upon the idea of like a West Bank Variety Hour, and doing a series of events where each time we're highlighting a different set of musicians. It could be from a different era of West Bank music history or a different style of West Bank music. It came together really well, and I think it ties into the notion of the West Bank as an immigrant culture. We had a lot of spoken word, poetry, and song, and in addition to the West Bank tying those things together, a lot of it was about immigration or coming to this country, or stories from back home, or even Sarah Larson's piece, like the folk music, the traditional Eastern European folk music. Everything tied all that really well.
We're P-I-R-A-T-E-S, we are much more, yet we choose to ignore the obvious. Even when history acknowledges we were kings long before the colonists. I'm from CEDAR, where we trust no local leaders. They use the local news station to feed us. They want a welfare queen and government cheese us. We're Princess Diana getting girls to dye their face and get them looking like a whole nother race. We got a lot of dropout King Tuts in the cup and a few glorious hood poet laureates.
And old age is unnoticed, the youth unfocused, and Al-Shabaab is trying to tell you they'll bring change, but only if you hold this. But I'm holding peace in one hand and freedom on the other. Peace in one hand and freedom on the other. And besides, what's the difference between galvanizing the bleak and sanitizing the heat, between utilizing the weak and institutionalizing the free? I said, what's the difference between galvanizing the bleak and sanitizing the heat, between utilizing the weak and institutionalizing the free? It's between not being able to see and what is the door of opportunities if you swallowed your own key. In order to stay sane, you have to confide in truth, because truth is woven in the fabrics of the women and the youth.
I mean, we really wanted to highlight the businesses that were here, and as we started like thinking about what we wanted to do, I just remember having like pages and pages of workshop ideas, and then just like following down the paths of the different workshops. Like there's a really wonderful bike culture on the West Bank. I mean, the Black Label Bike Club started here. You had a lot of the tall bikes coming out of the West Bank. We've been doing an annual West Bank ride. It's like getting people more comfortable biking throughout the West Bank. So we wanted a day that was centered all on bikes. Gearing up for winter cycling. I am not a four-season cyclist, so that was really enlightening to like knowing how to like layer up properly so you can handle the cold. roadside repair. I haven't ever patched a flat before, so that was little things like that. Like, it was just a really informative week, and each different day had its different theme and different purposes. I wanted to do a walking tour on the West Bank even before I had my job at the Business Association. We went to Manchester for our honeymoon, and I just really love the music history of Manchester, and I think they've done such a good job of capturing a lot of that history. And I'm like, why doesn't the West Bank have a walking tour? The West Bank is even more walkable than Manchester, and I'm like, why doesn't this already exist? Why don't we already have this walking tour? I'm like, we have to do that. The Crash Course Week was a really excellent catalyst to like these years of research that we've been putting together. It was a good time for us to just do the tour and piece all those bits of information together. When I was putting the music tour together, I didn't think that I could do it justice without talking with some of the people that are really experts on that, which include the residents here. Talked to Lisa Hammer from Palmer's, who's done a really good job of like getting some of the historical photos of the West Bank. I also met up with Andrea Swenson from The Current, who's done a lot of research on the West Bank and is doing a lot of research for a book that she's working on as well. So we talked about the music tour, and then Sin Collins, who wrote West Bank Boogie. It was really cool to see the old photos and like what the streets used to look like before some of the development happened. And they tell a really interesting story of the neighborhood. One of the things that I think would be really cool and that we were mindful of is so we've got the university, we've got all these really great institutions, and we've got a really good working relationship with them, but there's this like, and I've heard it named different things, but there's like the invisible barrier, the invisible wall between the neighborhood and the University of Minnesota. Without fail, every batch of interns that I've had, they've said, you know, I haven't spent a lot of time on the West Bank until I had this internship, and they really just fall in love with the neighborhood. And all these things that they heard their colleagues say, like, oh, don't hang out on the West Bank, oh, it's not safe, oh, you don't want to go there, they just shatter it.
It's kind of hard for me to understand now that I'm working in this area that there is such like almost exclusion, because the Cedar Riverside area is essentially a part of the University of Minnesota, or vice versa.
I thought a cool option might be to maybe include like a tour of this area during like freshman like welcome week.
I think events like this crash course are perfect to try to help move in the right direction. I think continuing to create awareness and showing all the positive aspects that this community has to offer is really important as well.
We worked with 2 students from the Leadership Minor Program to do a Hidden Treasures at the UofM. There's all these things that you can do on the University of Minnesota campus that people don't realize, like the Kaufman Bookstore and the Kaufman Union. And I didn't know this, but there's a full-service post office there where you can go, you can get your marriage license, you can get a death certificate, you can get it's like its own little like city within the city of Minneapolis. And I had no idea, but if I would have known you could do your marriage license there, we would have saved us a really horrible experience downtown. The West Bank is known for its independence, which has made it kind of a tricky space when it comes to foundation support and how the city approaches working on the West Bank. I mean, you have a history of a neighborhood that had more than its fair share of protests and has stopped development in its tracks. There are going to be changes no matter what. What can we do to like take ownership of that change and steer it the way it wants to go, instead of like the city or a really rich developer coming in and saying, we're going to do this, and then we react to it. It's like, let's have ownership of this neighborhood.
This was awesome.
Totally great. Thank you. The dog enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for the Southern Theater for taking a chance on a really weird, crazy idea and giving us a space for a week to try this thing.